Alright, so here we have the steering shaft assembly from the wheel to the rack, and it is secured down by two safety bolts which cannot be removed by normal means, as you can see here. And so what I'm doing is I'm cutting a groove into the head so that I can put in a screwdriver or some sort of leverage to pry them out. The reason that is because this assembly here is what actually holds the ignition barrel, which also controls the steering lock. So as part of a theft deterrent, you are not really going to be able to remove this quickly, and also after the assembly is in the vehicle, it kind of gets very difficult to access these two guys. So it was just easier to remove the whole assembly, get it out here on the bench, chop this guy out, and then get it done. Main reason for doing that is because we have gone to electronic ignition, and so this guy here will no longer be necessary. After I take this off, I want to see whether we can probably add an electronic steering lock in here. Probably maintain this section of the assembly, because it's the one that has the ejector arm that will release the steering lock once you put the key in. So yeah, let's see how it goes. Alright, so back here on the vehicle, we kind of ran into an interesting electronics issue because a lot of new components have been added, and that meant that I put in a fresh and new relay bank which wasn't originally supplied with the vehicle. So the plan was to have it sit in here somewhere on the crash bar. I'll build a bracket for it to mount onto that tapered screw hole, but then the issue we were having is that it was making contact with the driver side, this air vent. It was making contact with the shroud that feeds that vent. So the other plan was to just remove the steering assembly and see how to tidy up these wires, and probably trade places with this guy. This is a fuse and relay bank that is responsible for my fog lamps, but I mean they can both share the mount. Thank you, Toyota, for always making things standard. So that can sit in there, but then what happens is it's too big, it sits too low. So the plan will just be to keep this guy as is, then build a new bracket for this guy and angle it such that the relay bank is out of the way. So that's pretty much why the steering shaft assembly was taken out, just to make it easier for the whole process.
On that beat, go.
What do you think is the benefit of us creating the past? The food actually isn't that important. So we just arrange to look at the past through.
The assembly is off, and it came off rather easily. I had eaten up the bolt heads here, so I got enough leverage to use my 6.5 mil flathead screwdriver. So that's that, and as you can see, that's the locking pin, which then goes into the locking shaft here. Now it'll only lock the wheel at certain angles, that's why you see there's a bit of a gap. And of course, this is the mechatronic assembly, so the mechanical bit is out here. Then it has the electrical bit back here, which actually does your ignition switching, or the ignition switch over. So just as an example, this key is cut because during my electronic ignition upgrade, it didn't have room for the whole key fob, and I didn't want the steering locking, so it was chopped and left in there. But basically, when the key is in, there is pretty much no chance that the locking pin can eject. It only ejects after the key is removed. And there's also a missing component here. There's usually a switch of sorts here that tells the vehicle when the key is in, which also works to chime and remind you that the key is in when you open the door. So I'll just demonstrate. I'll put it back on off. If I have the Herculean strength to do it by hand, maybe not. And all the way to lock. Let's try again. 100 cameramanship is not easy. Alright, so there, we're at lock. Okay, almost. We're at lock. There we go. Now we're at lock. So you will notice that the pin will not eject until the key is pulled out. So when I do that, then now the pin ejects, which will try to lock the wheel. So depending on what the angle of the steering wheel is, let's say if it is at that angle, it won't be able to lock, but when you make attempts to turn the wheel, it'll find the slot and then click, lock into place. Now this guy, the locking pin, also usually disables you from any key movement. That's why you'll struggle and find that sometimes you'll put the key in, but when the pin is engaged, you're not able to turn the key. So what you need to do is to wiggle the wheel slightly to release the pin, and then that will allow your key to turn. So yeah, that's a quick 101 on how the steering locking pin works. And now it's time to get back to work, to reassemble this back on the vehicle so that we can do space frame testing.